Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we extract the most impactful knowledge from your shared source material. Today, we're performing a deep dive into an absolutely fascinating career. It's really defined by uh, duality and this incredible decades-long resilience, Ron Lynch.
Yeah, Ron Lynch.
If you are someone who appreciates the history of experimental, maybe late-night comedy, or perhaps more likely, if you happen to know the voice of several iconic, kind of strange characters on cartoons like Bob's Boogers or Adventure Time,
Mm.
you are intimately familiar with his work, even if you don't maybe place the name immediately. Our mission today is to rapidly and thoroughly understand the scale of his professional roles. We're looking at everything from pioneering live variety shows to these really long-running voice acting commitments.
That's right. We are working primarily from a comprehensive professional summary provided by the listener. It details his biography and extensive filmography and specific projects. And what becomes immediately clear, I think, is that this isn't just about the volume of work. It's a really strategic career split.
Okay, so let's get right to the hook then. What's the immediate defining insight when you look at these sources? What jumps out?
Well, the defining insight for me is his unique longevity, specifically through adaptation. I mean, Ron Lynch has successfully navigated two completely distinct and often, frankly, contradictory professional worlds.
How so?
Okay, so he is simultaneously a foundational figure in the highly localized, often cash-strapped, underground live comedy scene, hosting a famous, self-produced midnight show for years.
Right, tomorrow. We'll get into that.
Exactly. And at the same time, he's operating as a consistent, high-value asset in the extremely stable, high-commitment ecosystem of mainstream animated television.
Wow. That sounds like a creative and honestly a financial tightrope walk. You've got the chaos of the live stage meeting the precision required in the studio.
Precisely. We are looking at basically a masterclass in how to sustain a creative life. He seems to have used the structured stability of one discipline to fund the artistic freedom, maybe even the necessity of another.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the sheer scale of that timeline because really it dictates everything that follows, doesn't it?
It really does.
Okay, so the biographical anchors. They establish the immense time frame we're dealing with here. Ron Lynch was born February 1st, 1953. That puts him at 72 years old as of the source date.
Mm-hmm.
He originates from Bethpage, New York. But the key piece of data for context, the real anchor point for this entire career, is that he is listed as active from 1978 to the present.
Yeah, that active timeline is the most crucial detail, I think. We are discussing a minimum of 46 years spent navigating the entertainment industry. I mean, think about what 1978 means in comedy.
Right.
We are talking about the pre-cable boom era. The stand-up comedy explosion was just sort of getting ready to happen. When he started, the primary goal was probably just stage time, period, getting seen.
And the fact that he has continuously adapted through, well, everything. The rise and fall of the stand-up megaclubs, the emergence of alternative comedy in the 90s.
Yeah, big shift there.
The eventual shift to cable and specialized network content. And then finally, this digital streaming and animation explosion of the last, 15 years? It's really remarkable.
It absolutely implies radical adaptability, both in skill set and, frankly, attitude. When we look at his core occupational titles listed in the source, the versatility is just undeniable. Voice actor, film actor, television actor, comedian, and writer.
That's 5 distinct roles.
Right. And this isn't just like 5 different business cards. It's 5 different industry standards, 5 sets of expected deliverables, 5 entirely different financial models,
And crucially, this means he didn't just find one niche and stick with it. He was constantly chasing the evolution of creative output, it seems.
Definitely.
When maybe live-action sitcom roles dried up, he doubled down on writing and voice work. When the network standards perhaps became too rigid, he dove headfirst into the alt-comedy scene.
And we can see the fruit of that latter strategy, especially in his initial run of live-action and non-voice television appearances. These really frame the kind of niche, often strange, character-driven projects he excelled at.
Yeah, if you look at titles like Corporate, Corpse Tub, Another Period, Dope State, these are, by and large, critically acclaimed shows, often found on niche cable networks or streaming platforms, known for their unusual sense of humor.
Exactly. They require actors who aren't afraid of the absurd or the unconventional.
Definitely not standard sitcom fare.
No, these are projects that intentionally avoid that polished, multicam sitcom formula. They lean into sketch, improv, often very dry, dark, or even anti-humor concepts. He is like the perfect utility player for that environment because he seems comfortable being the weirdest person in the room.
Right. And his appearances on major touchstones of that specific comedic world, like Comedy Bang, and Portlandia, they just solidify that connection. Those shows became flagship programs for the alternative and sketch comedy explosion of the 2010s. So, for the listener trying to place him quickly, Ron Lynch is often the guy who lends this certain gravitas, a strange, knowing energy, and often brilliant, maybe ad-libbed character work to these otherwise structured, absurdist environments.
That foundation of flexibility, being able to pivot from highly scripted, high-concept roles to holding his own in a completely improvised environment, that's vital. It's the prerequisite, I think, for the institution he was simultaneously building in Hollywood, which demanded, consistent self-management and curation.
Which brings us neatly to the beating and sometimes, it sounds like, chaotic heart of his life career.
Yeah, Tomorrow.
For over a decade, the weekly musical and comedic variety show Tomorrow wasn't just a show, it was like an institution. It anchored the late-night independent comedy scene in Los Angeles. It was a staple every single Saturday night at midnight.
And that midnight slot is everything here. It tells you immediately this show is built for experimentation, right? For performers who had maybe already finished their paid gigs earlier in the night.
Right.
And for an audience dedicated enough, or maybe just nocturnal enough, to show up at 12:01 a.m. The rules are looser, the risks are higher, the material can be much more conceptual or even purposefully unfinished sometimes. This is a crucial element of the independent scene. It is the laboratory.
So the atmosphere, then, is key. It was a true variety show, not just stand-up. Our sources mention music, conceptual sketches, often bizarre performance art.
All sorts of stuff.
And for years, the original venue was the Steve Allen Theater. You picture this low-ceilinged, intimate space. It just lent itself perfectly to that low-stakes, high-art, maybe slightly anarchic vibe.
Absolutely. And this is where we get this really powerful venue transition narrative, which highlights a common, often agonizing challenge for independent cultural institutions in major cities: the resilience required to maintain a show like this. It's immense, especially when you're up against economic pressure.
Okay, let's follow that story persistence because it's pretty compelling. The Steve Allen Theater, the physical home of Tomorrow, for so long, was sold in 2017.
Yeah.
And the reason, as explicitly noted in our sources, was the common nemesis of local culture everywhere. The land was earmarked for condominium development.
Oh, there it is. This is such a tangible representation of economics displacing arts. It's not just that the show ended there, a whole community was displaced,
Yeah. We even know the specific final performance date at the original venue, September 30th, 2017. The sources mention that frequent guest magician John Carney was part of that final performance, which kind of underscores the communal, almost family nature of the show that was being forced out.
It really does.
And this is where Lynch's dedication really shines through, I think. He treated the show not just as a gig, but as like a necessary cultural function. It only took 4 months to reestablish the institution.
Which is incredibly fast, really.
It returned on February 3, 2018 at Dynasty Typewriter, which operates at a historic Hayworth Theater.
But the struggle didn't stop there. The sources actually detail subsequent moves. The show relocated sequentially, moving from Dynasty Typewriter to the Lyric Hyperion Theater.
Okay.
And then, according to the latest information we have, it established its current home at the Elysian Theater.
So this multiple move story is essential for you, the listener, to understand. It illustrates the sheer logistical and, frankly, administrative labor required to sustain an independent late-night comedy institution when the physical infrastructure is just unstable. Lynch wasn't just performing. He was acting as a tireless curator, producer, marketing force, constantly reestablishing the show's physical presence while somehow keeping the creative vision consistent.
And what's fascinating here is that the audience's loyalty was clearly to the brand and the host, Ron Lynch himself, not necessarily the building.
That's a great point.
And that dedication is clearly what kept the show alive through 3 different venue shifts in just a few years. It confirms his status as a true community pillar in that scene.
And this live collaborative work wasn't limited just to Tomorrow. We should also mention The Idiots.
Yes, absolutely. The Idiots was another key component of his history of creating live, writer-driven conceptual content. He performed this show with co-writer and co-actor Craig Anton and a rotating cast.
Okay.
So this demonstrates that his live work is deeply rooted in collaboration and performance pieces that are often scripted and focused on absurdist characters rather than, say, the pure solitary pursuit of stand-up comedy.
Right. So on one side, we have this self-produced, chaotic, logistically demanding world of tomorrow. Now we need to transition to the other side of the ledger, the structured, highly stable environment that perhaps ultimately allowed him to maintain that expensive passion project.
Exactly, the voice booth.
Moving from the unpredictable world of a live stage to the controlled, repeatable nature of the recording studio. This offers us the clearest picture, maybe, of his unique business model. The voice acting work really seems to be the anchor, providing the stability and duration that few live acts can offer.
And the breadth of his animated roles is just stunning. He wasn't just a bit player. He was a consistent, reliable presence across different animated genres, different demographics, starting actually quite early.
Yeah, let's go back to the building blocks. We see Science Court listed way back in 1997. That's an early entry showing he was already established in the voiceover scene before the new millennium.
Right.
But his work on home movies from 1999-2004, that's particularly significant for the alt comedy listener, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Home Movies was a foundational piece of early Adult Swim animation. It was famously animated using squiddle vision.
Right, that shaky style.
Yeah, that deliberately jittery, low-budget style that lent itself perfectly to the dry, often deadpan, dialogue-heavy comedy of the show. Lynch's involvement there really defined his association with that nascent style of smart, lo-fi alt animation that didn't rely on huge production budgets.
And following that, he firmly cemented his place in that specific absurdist lineage with Tom Goes to the Mayor from 2004 to 2006.
Yes, Tom Goes to the Mayor, pioneered by Tim Heidecker and Eric Wareheim. It was an exercise in deliberate anti-humor and intentional cringe comedy. It used these bizarre, highly stylized, often grotesque visuals.
Very unique look.
Totally. For Lynch's performance to fit this mandate, he had to master the delivery of anti-jokes and pure awkwardness. It proved he could play characters in that unique, unsettling, sometimes painful comedic register.
Then we see his shift, maybe, into more long-running professional consistency. Word Girl, running from 2007 to 2015. That demonstrates an 8-year commitment to an educational, yet still comedic series.
Right, and this required an entirely different type of performance, clear diction, high consistency, often playing the straight man or the slightly daffy authority figure, much different from Tom Goes to the Mayor.
Totally different. And this is where the financial stability you suspect truly kicks in. The core commitments that seem to define his voice career are these long-running staples. Adventure Time and Bob's Burgers both began their long runs in 2011.
Yeah, big year for him in animation.
Adventure Time ran for 7 years, ending in 2018. It was just a massive critical and cultural success, known for its incredible imaginative world building. Lynch voiced various memorable characters across its run, further cementing his place in influential animation, both for kids and adults.
But the Bob's Burgers commitment,
Yeah.
that's the central anchor here, I think. Running from 2011 to the present, according to our source, that is well over a decade of continuous service to a major animated franchise.
Yeah.
He is known there for voicing several characters, including the memorable and bizarre Ron the Handyman,
Right.
who often appears as the slightly uncomfortable, dry-witted foil to the Belcher family's chaos.
He's great in that role.
Yeah.
So to maintain that level of professionalism, quality control, schedule reliability for a decade plus, especially for a network like FOX, that's a feat of incredible talent in the booth.
Yeah.
What does that voice work specifically require compared to his live performance? It seems so different.
It requires almost an exact opposite skill set, which is really the genius of his duality. Live comedy is high risk, high reward, often improvisational, very in the moment. Voice work requires you to replicate the same character, the same voice, the same intonation, sometimes years later across hundreds of episodes. It demands technical consistency and an incredible memory for delivery cues and character nuances. The voice booth is predictable, relatively high-paying. The midnight stage is experimental and often, low-paying or volunteer-based.
And his guest spots seem to confirm his role as an early adopter of that alt comedy voice trend, too. We have Dr. Katz, professional therapist back in 1997, which, like home movies, was a cornerstone of that early adult animated style where comedians were often encouraged to improvise loosely around a script.
Exactly. And appearances on shows like Star vs. the Forces of Evil demonstrate that he continues to span the generational gap. He's working in modern animated formats that appeal to younger audiences while still maintaining those highly specific adult comedy roles. He has truly mastered the art of the audio performance across, well, all formats, it seems.
Okay, so we've established these two parallel tracks, the chaotic stage and the structured booth. Now, let's use the detailed chronology of his filmography to really analyze the chronological overlap.
Yeah.
Because for you, the listener, seeing these dates laid out really reveals the professional trade-offs he must have been making.
Right. And what's essential here, I think, is charting his early network television ambition against his later, more niche success. You can almost see the shift in strategy, from trying to land a reliable mainstream role to maybe accepting that his unique skills were actually better suited for the alt-comedy wave that was building.
Yeah, look at the early 2000s. Raising Dad from 2001 to 2002, and Andy Richter Controls the Universe in 2003. These were attempts at conventional broadcast network sitcoms, the classic path, right?
Yeah.
For a working actor.
The dream, yeah.
They didn't last long, but they ground him firmly in that specific era of network comedy attempts.
And those shorter network runs, they kind of illustrate the instability of that mainstream world, which perhaps is what drove him further toward the stability offered by long-term voice contracts and the, creative satisfaction of his self-produced live show.
Makes sense. And we see a distinct, crucial pivot around 2007. Where his high-profile guest work became much more niche and genre-specific. Consider the simultaneous appearances on the Sarah Silverman program in 2007.
Okay.
And Tim and Eric, awesome show, great job, from 2007 to 2008.
That pairing right there is kind of a masterclass in professional triangulation. The Sarah Silverman program was known for edgy, character-driven comedy.
Yeah?
While Tim and Eric was the absolute peak of postmodern, absurdist, sometimes deliberately uncomfortable comedy, Lynch became the perfect utility player for both, demonstrating this ability to just pivot his delivery style instantly.
And this period, 2007 onward, this is really the apex of the overlap we've been talking about. This is when he launched his 8-year run on Word Girl. He began appearing regularly on the boundary-pushing Tim and Eric show. And he was firmly rooted in maintaining his weekly, independent, Tomorrow live show, all at once.
Let's just focus on a specific 3-year window, maybe 2011 to 2014, just to fully appreciate the demand.
Okay.
In 2011, he launched Bob's Burgers and Adventure Time, 2 massive voice commitments that require dedicated, consistent studio hours.
Right, major shows.
Simultaneously, every single weekend, he was the logistical and creative engine behind a late-night variety show that could run until 2 a.m. or later.
Right.
And he was still doing live guest spots on shows like Portlandia in between all of that.
It honestly sounds impossible.
Yeah.
How do you maintain a weekly midnight show which requires booking, hosting, setup, teardown, while holding down stable, high-commitment studio voice work? What do the sources imply about the specific trade-offs he had to make? Did one suffer for the other?
Well, they imply, I think, pretty strongly that the financial security provided by the voice work directly subsidized the artistic freedom of the live show.
Oh.
Voice acting, while demanding, is often done during specific daytime hours, right? It allows for a more structured work week. This probably allowed him to maintain Tomorrow as a personal experimental platform without the crushing financial pressure of needing it to turn a profit or even be his main source of income. It was, in a way, an expensive, necessary hobby supported by mainstream success.
That makes a lot of sense. And the detailed chronology confirms that this decades-long timeline isn't just archival history, it's an active, ongoing career. We see listings right into the present day, including the film entry, Anyone Else But Me in 2024, showing continuous activity across different mediums.
Exactly. So the takeaway from this chronological review is pretty simple, I think. Longevity in the arts, especially when you're balancing fringe, experimental content with professional stability, often means having multiple revenue streams that don't compete with each other, but rather ideally support one another. He seems to have mastered that dynamic beautifully. Hashtag tag tag outro.
So after this extensive look at the stage work, the voice work, the whole timeline, what is the final synthesis of this deep dive? What's the big takeaway?
Ron Lynch's career is, I think, the definition of professional endurance. It's defined by his successful navigation between these two opposing realities. The volatile, creatively free, community-driven survival of the independent live scene,
Hmm.
and the highly structured, reliable financial ecosystem of long-running animated television. He is fundamentally a master of distinct, simultaneous disciplines.
It's almost like a roadmap for longevity in the creative industries, showing that artistic freedom often needs some kind of corporate structure or at least stable income to survive.
Exactly. He used the stability of being, Ron the handyman on Bob's Burgers to keep the experimental, venue-hopping chaos of tomorrow alive. He found that sweet spot where his professional skills funded his artistic passion.
And finally, that one detail we mentioned earlier, which feels like the emotional core of his struggle on the live stage.
Yeah.
It gets back into focus now. The fact that the original Steve Allen Theater site, the true home and heart of tomorrow for so long, was sold and demolished for condominium development.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it raises an important question, maybe a provocative one for you, the listener, about the infrastructure of culture in economically booming cities.
Right. This raises a really important question. In a major economically vibrant cultural center like Hollywood or any big city, really, how often does the immediate quantifiable profit represented by, say, a condominium development displace vital, long-running cultural institutions that are almost impossible to quantify on a balance sheet?
Yeah, what's the hidden cost?
Exactly. What is the unseen cost when venues that foster experimental talent venues run by resilient, well-known industry figures like Ron Lynch are simply erased from the map? And what does it take just in terms of sheer will and maybe financial sacrifice for those cultural ideas, those communities, to survive once their original physical home is gone?
A question of cultural necessity versus perhaps economic inevitability. A truly comprehensive deep dive into an artist whose work has quietly helped define modern comedy in multiple ways.
Indeed, it's really an inspiring example of persistence when you look at it all together.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We hope this gave you a whole new appreciation for the versatility, the adaptability, and maybe the sheer tenacity required to make a career last decades in the creative sphere, especially when balancing the brilliant and the bizarre.
Until next time.